What if I told you the most dangerous weapon forged against you isn't a gun, a curse, or even a lie, it's lust, that your secret battle with masturbation isn't just a bad habit. It's a calculated strike from the pits of hell, crafted to keep a warrior of God crawling when you were born, to command legions. This isn't a slip-up. This is a sniper shot aimed at your destiny, because the enemy knows if you ever break free, if you ever go 90 days in full purity, your spirit will ignite with a power so fierce, so untouchable, that every demon assigned to your name will tremble. Every single urge you resist is more than moral discipline. It's the sound of chains shattering in the spirit realm. It's you reclaiming territory that hell has squatted on for years. And make no mistake, this is not about repression, it's about resurrection. 90 days of purity is not a break. It's an ascension. It's the moment you stop living as prey and start moving as the predator heaven trained you to be. If you're still watching, it's because deep down, you know you were never meant to blend in. That strange disconnection from the crowd, that's God's fingerprint. Lust has been trying to bury you because heaven has been trying to enthrone you. So hit like right now. Subscribe if you haven't. And drop 777 inch the comments as your spiritual battle cry. To everyone who's been sowing into this ministry through Super, thank you. You're not just supporting content, you're fueling a movement. Now lean in, because what comes next might just be the turning point of your life. God's chosen ones. They want you addicted to masturbation because of what you'd become without it. They've told you that energy is measured only in calories burned, miles walked, or how fast your metabolism runs. But what if that's the shallowest definition of energy you'll ever hear? What if the power that shapes your destiny is not counted in numbers on a smartwatch, but in the hidden reserves of your spirit? The truth they never put in school textbooks is that when you break free from the endless cycle of purposeless sexual release, you are not simply conserving muscle strength. You are reclaiming the very currency of your divine calling. At first, the changes are almost imperceptible, like the way roots grow beneath the soil before a tree bursts into bloom. You begin waking up with unusual clarity. Your mind feels like a sharpened blade. Your presence in a room shifts the air, and people sense it even before you speak. Why? Because your energy is no longer scattered across moments of weakness. It's being gathered, stored, and magnified. Proverbs 4:23 speaks of this principle clearly. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guarding your purity is guarding the source code of your destiny. Have you ever noticed how a lion walks, not in haste, not in fear, but with a weight of certainty? That's what happens when a man stops wasting his seed. His posture changes, his eyes steady, his voice gains resonance. It's the difference between a flickering candle and a roaring bonfire. Isaiah kelpinicast 13 promises. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. This renewal is not metaphorical, it's tangible, and people can feel it. Michelangelo, the Renaissance master who carved David from a single block of marble, once said, "The greater danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it." He was speaking of art, but the same truth governs purity. If you lower the purpose of your body to momentary indulgence, you will hit mediocrity every time. But if you raise it to its divine design, you sculpt not just muscle and posture, you sculpt eternity. And the enemy knows this. That's why there is such an aggressive war to keep you chained to lust. Consider Alcibiades, the brilliant but undisciplined general of ancient Athens. His charisma could bend nations, yet his appetites fractured alliances, destroyed trust, and led him into exile. His downfall wasn't the absence of talent, it was the erosion of self-mastery. This is why 1 Peter 5-8 warns, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." Then, do you realize what's really at stake if you win this battle? When you conquer lust, you don't just gain control over a habit, you inherit spiritual authority. Your words carry weight. Your decisions carry power. And your presence shifts atmospheres. Psalm 18:29 declares, "With your help I can advance against a troop. With my God I can scale a wall." That's the kind of energy you're reclaiming, an energy that can break barriers in both the seen and unseen realms. The late motivational giant Jim Rohn once said, "Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment." He wasn't just talking about career success, he was describing a spiritual law. That bridge is what the enemy wants to burn in your life. Because once it's gone, you're stranded between potential and regret. And here's the question most men never stop to ask. If so much changes in your life when you hold back from this one habit, what are you truly capable of becoming? The enemy already knows the answer. That's why he fears you free more than he fears you. Now it's your turn to rise. The time for compromise is over. The chains have been exposed. The strategy of the adversary revealed. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13. Stand up in the authority heaven placed in you before the foundations of the world. This is not about surviving temptation. It's about walking into your God-given dominion. The battlefield is real, but so is the crown. They call it self-control. But in truth, it is a restoration of the way God designed you to operate. When your energy no longer leaks into the void, it flows back into you like a river that's been redirected to nourish the land it was meant for. Your seed is not merely biological, it is a sacred container, holding intelligence, legacy, identity, and command. Ecclesiastes 7:2 reminds us, wisdom preserves those who have it, and part of that wisdom is knowing that every time you release without reason, you send pieces of your inner kingdom into exile. But when you rise above the craving, your nervous system recalibrates. The storms in your mind settle. Your spirit begins to radiate, not like a blinding spotlight, but like the steady weight of a planet whose gravity quietly holds moons in place. Can you feel it? That invisible pull that makes strangers treat you differently, that causes people to listen even before you speak. Psalm 62:1 declares, "Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him." That rest is what your presence starts to carry. Nature itself mirrors this transformation. Think of an ancient cedar tree, roots sunk deep into bedrock, unshaken by decades of storms. It doesn't move to impress, it simply stands, and the forest bends around it. In the same way, your aura, your spiritual field, becomes whole again. Women sense it, men feel it, but they can't always name it, because this energy doesn't shout, ed, or perform. It simply exists, like the stillness before a thunderstorm, when the air is heavy with power about to be released. In the 1959 French film Les 400 coups, The 400 Blows, the young protagonist stands at the edge of the sea, silent, staring into the horizon, a moment of stillness before his life's defining chapter begins. That's what this discipline does. It brings you to the shoreline of who you were always meant to be. The man heaven whispered into existence, the one who should have been walking with authority all along, but couldn't, because his fuel was spilling into the sand. And here's where it deepens. This restored energy doesn't just alter how others see you, it reshapes what your life draws in. Have you noticed that when a river swells in strength, even the banks have to adjust? That's your environment responding to you. People with hidden agendas suddenly feel exposed. Opportunities that used to slip past begin to stop and wait for you. Isaiah 61 comments. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. End of 4. But here's the question that should keep you awake at night. If this much changes simply because you refused to bow to lust, what could happen if you lived your entire life from that place of unbroken power? 2 Timothy 1-7 affirms, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." This is why sacred abstinence true. God-centered abstinence is not repression. It's a weapon, a forgotten one that the enemy hopes you never learn to wield. So now, the choice stands in front of you like a gate. Will you remain a man the world can predict and manipulate? Or will you become the one heaven always intended, a man whose presence alone shifts the ground beneath him? Stand firm, and you will win life. Luke 21:19. Get up. Walk in the authority already stamped into your spirit. The war is real, but the victory is already written. It turns weak men into unshakable pillars, noise into crystal vision, and distraction into unbreakable direction. But here's the truth. Few dare to say this shift is not comfortable. The moment you begin reclaiming your power, urges will rise like a furnace at full combustion. Your body will revolt. Your mind will demand escape, because you're engaging in something rare, dangerous, and spiritually revolutionary in neuroscience. This is called neuroplastic disruption. You are literally rewiring the brain's reward circuits, breaking an entrenched loop. Spiritually, you are dismantling a fortress built to keep you dependent, empty, and sedated. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. You are tearing down one architecture while erecting another, brick by brick, beam by beam, an inner cathedral meant to house divine authority. Have you felt that strange tension between collapse and breakthrough? That's the moment athletes call the silent round in championship boxing, when both fighters are too winded to swing, and the one who steadies his breath first will own the next exchange. That's you now. If you hold the line long enough, temptation doesn't just weaken, it loses jurisdiction. Power takes the throne. And when that happens, you won't need to declare who you are. Your energy will broadcast it in a frequency the spirit realm can't ignore. But here's where the story sharpens. Once your power rises, so do the tests. Psalm 66:10 tells us, "For you, God, tested us, you refined us like silver." The refining doesn't come from the outside first, it comes from within. The battlefield shifts inward, and the fight is now with the echoes of your old self. Have you ever wondered why some men, even the strongest, collapse just when they seem unstoppable? One modern example comes from Howard Schultz, the visionary who built Starbucks into a global empire. Schultz once admitted in a rare interview that the greatest battle he faced wasn't market competition, but resisting the comfort of complacency once success came. Complacency, he said, is the invisible quicksand that swallows leaders whole. For many chosen ones, lust plays the same role. It doesn't strike with a sword. It lulls you into laying your armor down. This is why the Bible warns in 1 Corinthians 10:12, so, if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. The enemy doesn't need to knock down a man who has laid down his own weapon. He only needs to keep him distracted until the edge of his spirit dulls. And now comes the question, if you've been rebuilt from the inside out, will you pass the test that follows? Will you remain a fortress or become rubble again? James 1:12 promises, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life." Now stand. This is your moment to decide if your story ends in repetition or resurrection. Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13. Heaven has already drafted your blueprint, pillar by pillar, gate by gate. It's time to inhabit it. The war is still on. But so is your crown. They're not broken beyond repair, they're fogged, clouded by an invisible film that clings to the mind like ash after a sacred fire has been suffocated. Have you ever wondered why even men who seem outwardly strong can feel aimless and hollow inside? Lust is often the culprit, not just the act, but the relentless flood of images, cravings, fantasies, and counterfeit dopamine that hijack the brain day after day. It's a slow corrosion, the kind that eats away at clarity without making a sound. Over time, you forget what sharpness even feels like, and you begin mistaking survival for living. Psalm 119:37 cries out, "Turn my eyes away from worthless things, preserve my life according to your word." That's the prayer of a man who knows how dangerous visual poison can be. It happens so subtly that you rarely notice the theft. It begins with a glance, a scroll, a click. Before you know it, your mental bandwidth is gone. The sharpness of your focus dulls, your unfinished tasks pile up, and worst of all, your spiritual reception fades until you can no longer hear the whisper of God. Proverbs 29:18 tells us, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Lust doesn't just attack your body, it fractures the lens through which you see life. And when you can't see, you can't build, lead, or even recognize who you are. It's like trying to navigate a storm without a compass. Every decision becomes a guess, and every step feels heavier than the last. How many opportunities have already slipped through your fingers because you were fighting a battle in your mind instead of building what God called you to? But something miraculous begins the moment you cut the signal. When you starve the flesh and feed the soul, your inner world starts to clear. It doesn't happen overnight, but gradually the fog lifts. You notice colors deepening, conversations feeling richer, time slowing into something tangible again. Philippians 4:8. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, think about such things. That's not just a suggestion, it's a blueprint for mental freedom. And with each day of clarity, you realize how much you've been missing. The ideas that used to come easily, the peace that once made you steady, the faith that gave you courage. You start to wonder, was God speaking all along, and I just couldn't hear him? History gives us countless examples of men who learned this truth the hard way. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, once admitted in an interview that focus is not just about saying yes, it's about saying no to 100 temptations for the sake of one vision. His empire wasn't built on scattered energy, but concentrated intention, and in a spiritual sense, that's exactly what breaking free from lust does. It gathers your energy into a single, powerful beam. With that kind of focus, distractions lose their grip, and vision sharpens until every step you take has purpose. Could it be that your destiny has been waiting for this very moment of alignment, when nothing competes with your calling, but there's a darker side we can't ignore? In the late Roman Empire, Emperor Commodus inherited unimaginable power, yet his addiction to pleasure, vanity, and endless indulgence hollowed him from within. His rule became erratic, his leadership despised, and his empire weakened. Eventually, he was assassinated, not by his enemies first, but by those closest to him. His downfall wasn't a lack of authority, it was a forfeiture of vision. This is why 1 Peter 5-8 warns, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." Commodus' fate is a living reminder. Power without purity is a kingdom built on sand, and sand always collapses. So the question stands, if the fog lifted from your mind, what might you hear from God that you've been missing? Could the ideas, strategies, and breakthroughs you've been praying for already be waiting hidden behind the static? Isaiah 26:3 promises, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." Imagine waking up tomorrow without the heaviness, walking into your day with full mental clarity, and hearing God's instructions with precision. How different would your choices be? How much ground could you take back in just 1 year of living clear-headed? It's time to rise. The enemy thrives in your confusion, but he fears your clarity. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Hebrews 12:1. Step out of the cloud and into the light. Your mind is a battlefield, but also a throne. Guard it, claim it, and watch the kingdom be built through it. The war for your focus is the war for your future, and today, you decide who wins. Conversations don't just become clearer, you begin to feel yourself again. Not the fractured, half-awake version that's been walking through life, but the ancient one, the version beneath all the noise. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to meet the you God designed before the distractions took over? That's who starts to rise. And then come the ideas, not shallow, recycled scraps from other minds, but living blueprints. They arrive like streams after a drought, original and alive, carrying visions and instructions you never could have manufactured. James Viance, Pietzi Assuresus. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. And suddenly you realize he's been answering all along. You just couldn't hear him through the static. You begin to see your pain has a pattern. Doors that once felt cruelly blocked now reveal themselves as God's protection. You start connecting dots from your past, the way constellations turn random stars into a map. And isn't it wild how a story that once felt broken can, in the right light, become a prophecy in progress? Psalm 37:23 reminds us, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord." That order was always there, you just couldn't read it before. Like a river running underground, the flow never stopped. You just didn't know where to dig. And it doesn't stop there. Suddenly, people's intentions become transparent. What once fooled you now feels as obvious as a snake slithering across white snow. You no longer get played, manipulated, or misled, because your spirit is no longer asleep. You start to see your habits for what they are, seeds producing a harvest. Whether good or bad, you spot traps before they spring shut. Proverbs 22:3 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." With open eyes, you walk differently, not paranoid, but prepared. It's like the way an eagle rides the wind currents high above the earth. From that height, nothing is hidden. Prey, predators, and storms are all visible long before they reach the ground. That's what clarity does. It puts you above the chaos, not so you can escape it, but so you can move through it with precision. And in that elevation, you begin to understand the voice of God, not as a fleeting whisper, but as a steady frequency flowing through every decision. This is why your clarity is feared, because when a man truly sees, he becomes unshakable to the system that once controlled him. He is no longer a slave to lust. He becomes a seer. In ancient times, seers didn't just interpret dreams, they shaped the destiny of nations. Think of Joseph in Genesis 41, interpreting Pharaoh's dream and redirecting the fate of an entire empire. Luke 11:34 captures it well. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body also is full of light. When your inner vision is restored, your influence multiplies. It reminds me of the closing scene in the 1966 film A Man for All Seasons, where Sir Thomas More, facing execution, stands with unshaken conviction because he sees the truth more clearly than his accusers. His body could be taken, but his vision could not be touched. That's the level of clarity God calls you into, not fragile, but éternel. And here's the part no one warns you about when your vision clears. Your surroundings can no longer remain the same. Have you ever seen how a sudden beam of sunlight through a dense forest changes the entire scene? Shadows scatter, colors reveal themselves, and even the smallest details become visible. That's what happens when the fog lifts from your mind. The false friendships, the hidden agendas, and the stagnant environment start to stand out in sharp relief. John 8:32 declares, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." But freedom isn't always comfortable sometimes. It means stepping away from what once felt safe but was silently draining you. This shift is like watching ice break apart on a frozen river in spring. At first, it's subtle, a few cracks, a slight movement, but then the current surges through, unstoppable. And when God becomes the current in your life, the flow carries away everything that cannot endure. His light, opportunities that align with your purpose begin to appear, while distractions fall away on their own. It reminds me of a moment in the 1946 film, It's a Wonderful Life, when George Bailey finally sees the impact of his life with fresh eyes. He returns to his ordinary town, yet nothing is ordinary anymore because he now sees value, purpose, and divine alignment in every detail. That's the kind of revelation God intends for you, not just to see your life differently, but to step into it with the authority of one who knows exactly why he's here. Now, rise. Don't settle for blurred vision when God has designed you for prophetic sight. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Isaiah 60:1. Your clarity is your weapon, your vision is your shield, and the moment you choose to guard it, you become the kind of man who doesn't just live history, you rewrite it. That same capacity, the strength to see clearly, to lead with conviction, to walk as one who cannot be moved, is inside you. But for years, it's been buried beneath layers of spiritual noise. Every unguarded glance, Every moment of indulgence, every false pleasure has been like dust settling on a masterpiece until the image is almost unrecognizable. Yet when you stop draining your essence, when you preserve the life force God entrusted to you, something shifts. Your mind stops being a marketplace where every distraction sets up a stall. It becomes a throne. And from that throne, the king himself begins to reign. But make no mistake, with clarity comes responsibility. This is not a toy you can set down when you tire of it. Once your sight returns, you start noticing what you used to ignore, words that no longer align with your spirit, environments that drain you instead of filling you, relationships that quietly pull you away from your assignment. Have you felt it? That unsettling conviction in your thoughts, the sudden weight in your chest when you stand somewhere you no longer belong. To whom much is given, much will be required. Luke 12:48. Clarity is not just a gift, it's an assignment. And here's where it deepens. When your eyes open, you see too much to go back. You can't unsee the truth. Like a soldier on the battlefield who has studied the enemy's map, you carry knowledge that changes how you move forever. This is the irreversibility principle in physics, applied to the spirit once energy shifts into a higher state. It resists returning to the lower. The voice you once tried to silence, the calling you buried under busyness and compromise, rise again. And this time, you don't just hear it, you believe it. This is the voice that's been with you since childhood, whispering that you were made for more. For years you doubted it, wondering if it was just your imagination. But now, the architecture of heaven within you has been cleared of debris, revealing corridors and chambers you didn't even know existed. 1 Corinthians 2:9 reminds us, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. And as you walk those inner halls, you realize you've only been living in the foyer of what God built inside you. What you see next might demand a version of yourself you've never met before, but you're about to. This is like the quiet before the final round in a championship fight. The crowd is roaring, the adrenaline is high, but there's a moment where the fighter stands still, breathing deeply, locking eyes with his opponent. In that stillness, the fight is already decided, not by brute force, but by clarity of intent. That's you now. You're stepping into a confrontation that isn't just about survival, but about destiny. You thought you were merely resisting lust, saying no to a habit, fighting off urges, controlling your body. But what if I told you that wasn't the battle at all? What if I told you you were actually fighting for something eternal? Every moment you choose purity, every time you deny the flesh, you're not just avoiding sin, you're channeling spiritual voltage back into your core. Like rewiring a cathedral so its lights blaze at full capacity. Ephesians 6:13. Put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. The truth is, your resistance is building an empire within. In architecture, there's a principle called load-bearing integrity. Remove one critical beam, and the whole structure collapses. Lust has been chipping at that beam for years, hoping the entire framework of your destiny would cave in. But every time you stand firm, you reinforce the foundation. You add weight to your spiritual columns. You restore the resonance of your temple. In the business world, this truth plays out. Take Indra Nooyi, former CEO of PepsiCo, who once revealed that her most pivotal leadership decisions came from moments of deliberate withdrawal from noise. No media, no meetings, just focused stillness. She called it guarding the gates of the mind. Her results changed the trajectory of a global brand. If that level of discipline can reshape corporations, what could it do for a man entrusted with heaven's assignments? If you knew that each act of self-control was erecting unseen walls of protection, would you still treat purity like it was optional? If you could feel the weight of the crown already molded for your head, would you trade it for a moment of counterfeit pleasure? Hebrews 12:11 tells us, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful later on. However, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." And now rise. This is your season to reclaim the throne of your mind, to walk through the blueprint God drew before you were born, to fight not just for freedom, but for the fullness of your calling. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1-9. The cost of clarity is high, but the reward is eternal. And the man you meet on the other side will be the one heaven always knew you could become. You are being watched by heaven, by hell, by the entire spiritual realm. Have you ever stopped to think about what that really means? The battle you're in is about far more than your comfort, your urges, or your pleasure. It's about your position, your authority, your rank in the unseen hierarchy. In the spiritual world, there are no titles without battles, no crowns without crosses, no true power without death to the flesh. Matthew 16:24 reminds us, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." When a man lays down the most primal parts of himself, not because he is forced to, but because he chooses to, something begins to shift in his identity. It's the difference between a soldier who simply survives the war and one who comes home decorated, carrying the authority of his victories. He's no longer just a believer. He becomes a threat to darkness. He's not just a man, he's a marked one, branded in the spirit, set apart as a warrior who refused to bow to the altars of lust, addiction, and comfort. History is filled with leaders who understood this principle of sacrifice. Consider William Wilberforce, the 18th century British politician who led the decades-long fight to abolish the slave trade. He walked away from personal wealth, popularity, and influence to pursue a mission God placed in his heart. It cost him almost everything. But the victory reshaped nations. In the same way, when you choose consecration in secret, heaven sees it, and heaven takes note. Because heaven is not moved by appearance, it's not impressed by talent, charisma, or image. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." And when God sees a man who denies himself in secret, who chooses consecration when no one is watching, he begins to authorize him. Suddenly, your words carry weight. Your prayers pierce the atmosphere. Your silence unsettles the enemy. But the spiritual realm also has its counterfeits, men who were entrusted with influence but surrendered it to lust and self-indulgence. Take King Zedekiah of Judah, a ruler who was given chance after chance by God to turn back from rebellion. Instead, he ignored every warning, surrendered to fear, and allowed compromise to guide his reign. The result? His kingdom fell. His sons were killed before his eyes, and he was led into exile in chains. His life became a warning that authority without purity is a throne built on sand. So let me ask you, what will your name carry in the spiritual realm? Will it be spoken with honor among the angels, or as a cautionary tale among the fallen? James 4:10 promises, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up." This lifting is not random. It is a response to a life laid down in obedience. When God authorizes you, the effects are undeniable. Suddenly, when you speak, angels move. When you intercede, atmospheres shift. When you simply stand, chains begin to break. That is why your fight against lust is not a private matter. It is a public declaration in the Spirit that you refuse to be owned by anything other than God. Now is the moment to rise. Lay down what you cannot keep to gain what you cannot lose. Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13. The crown is forged in the fire you are in right now. Don't step out of it until heaven calls your name. They know your name in realms you've never seen. Your footsteps are registered in places your eyes have never walked. In heaven's archives, your file is marked. In hell's strategy rooms, your image is on the wall. Why? Because you've stepped into a kind of obedience that shakes both kingdoms at once. This battle is no longer about urges or temptation. It's about rank, authority, and the weight you carry in the Spirit. And the moment you chose to crucify what the world celebrates, you became the kind of man they can't ignore. Don't think hell isn't watching. 2. Because when you walk in purity, when your heart is clean and your vessel is full, the demonic realm recognizes you, not with theatrical fear like in the movies, but with something more dangerous: respect. They don't rush in swinging. They strategize. They send distractions that look like destiny, counterfeits that sound like truth, emotional setups designed to detour your focus. Why? Because you've become too costly to confront head-on. In their eyes, you're no longer vulnerable prey, you're fortified territory. Nature itself mirrors this truth. A towering redwood tree doesn't waste its energy reacting to every gust of wind. It's rooted too deep, grown too strong, and its very presence reshapes the forest around it. That's you now, unshakable. Not because storms don't come, but because your roots have found living water. Jeremiah 17:8 promises. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. You've crucified your weakness, and in its place, you carry fire, unshakable fire. It's the kind of fire that is violent in the spirit, yet peaceful in your presence. You're no longer reactionary. You don't chase validation. You don't crumble under temptation. You walk with something ancient, something sacred, something that was born in the hidden places. And it didn't come from a sermon alone or a self-help book. It came from your private war, from the lonely nights when no one was cheering, from the silent prayers that only heaven heard, from the unseen tears that watered the soil of your spirit. It's the same transformation we see in the 1961 film El Cid, where the Spanish knight Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar fights battles not for personal glory, but for the unifying peace of his people. Even after death, his enemies feared the sight of his armor, because they knew the man inside had been forged in sacrifice. That's what your spiritual presence becomes, something that shifts the atmosphere simply by existing. So, I have to ask if all of this was built in silence, in pain, in moments no one applauded. Will you guard it now that it's visible? Will you protect the authority that was birthed in fire? 1 Peter 1-7 reminds us. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Haifu, now rise. Walk as the vessel you've become. Carry the fire you fought for. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. You are not just a man anymore. You are living proof that the unseen war can be won. And from this day forward, let your presence announce to every realm, heaven, earth, and hell, that you are a vessel set apart for the glory of God. Heaven recognizes you. Hell steps back. Earth starts to listen. Why? Because a man who carries true authority doesn't need to announce himself. The spiritual realm already made the proclamation. But pay attention here, because this is where it cuts deeper. Authority is not a trophy you hang on a shelf. It is a mantle you bear. It is not for display. It is a weight. And if you don't know how to steward it, you risk holding power with no purpose, favor with no discipline to guard it. Think of it like a structural engineer entrusted with the blueprint of a suspension bridge. Every cable, every beam, every weight distribution matters. Proverbs 4:26 says, "Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways." In the dimension where legacy begins, every step you take becomes part of an eternal architecture. One careless move can fracture more than your own life. It can cause tremors across everyone you influence. Then there's something most people don't talk about, something powerful, unspoken, almost magnetic, that happens when a man masters his urges. It doesn't come from words. Your clothing, your hairstyle, your smile, or your social status. It's what psychology calls baseline resonance, the unique frequency your presence emits when your inner world is whole. When a man walks through life with his sexual energy untouched, stored, and guarded, he radiates something ancient. And when that happens, don't you wonder, why do people turn their heads without even knowing why? Women don't just see it, they feel it, without you saying a word. They sense a steadiness, a presence that is different, stronger, uncommon. Men don't always understand it, but they adjust their posture in your presence. This is why 1 Corinthians 6:19 reminds us, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit? You are not your own." In the language of architecture, you have reinforced the load-bearing walls of your temple, and the sound waves of your spirit ring undistorted through it. We see a shadow of this in the life of Norwegian explorer Fridtjof Nansen, who led his crew through impossible Arctic conditions. His men followed him, not just because of his skill, but because his calm, unwavering presence stabilized the entire expedition. In the same way, a man who has mastered his impulses becomes a fixed point in a chaotic world, a living compass others align themselves to. This kind of authority is forged in what athletes call the quiet round, that moment between grueling bouts when the body screams for rest, but the mind decides whether to surrender or surge forward. Spiritually, it is the same. Galatians 5:6 exhort, "Walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh." Every private victory you win in those moments becomes a public force in the unseen realm. So let me ask you, if the frequency you carry could shift rooms and shape destinies, would you guard it with your life? Or would you let a moment's weakness detune the entire instrument God crafted you to be? 2 Timothy 2:21 promises, "Those who cleanse themselves will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the Master, and prepared to do any good work." Then, walk as the vessel you've been forged to be. Protect the resonance heaven gave you. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13. You didn't gain this weight in the spotlight. You built it in the silence, in the fire, in battles no one saw. Carry it like a man who knows it came at a cost only heaven can measure. When a man is driven by purpose, He becomes a shock to the system. He doesn't linger with aimless stares. He doesn't chase shadows. He doesn't waste breath trying to impress anyone. Instead, he observes. He listens. He carries stillness like a weapon, and that stillness makes noise in the spirit. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." And when a man is no longer moved by the impulses of the flesh, something strange happens. The flesh begins to move toward him, not in fear, but in fascination. Have you noticed how rare this is? Most women are not used to encountering spiritual men. They're used to men who want something, men who look with hunger, who lead with need, who are secretly hoping for a moment of validation, attention, or conquest. But when you've killed the beast inside, when you've laid your lust on the altar, you become untouchable. That's when eyes begin to see you differently, not because they desire you, but because they can't categorize you. You radiate something steady, unbothered, a quiet power that cannot be seduced. This truth echoes in the life of American statesman Booker T. Washington, rising from slavery to become a leading educator. He once said, "Character, not circumstances, makes the man." Washington's unshakable discipline drew respect even from those who opposed his ideals, because people instinctively respond to strength that is not for sale. In the same way, when you master your urges, you're no longer negotiating with the world for worth. You carry it from within. But here is where the real test begins. This new attention is not a reward, it is a trap. James 1:14 warns, "Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. The same spirits that once whispered through late-night images now step into daylight, wearing perfume, dressing the part, and speaking your language. They know they can't tempt your eyes anymore, so they go after your confidence, your curiosity, your compassion, anything that might open a crack in your armor." History has its warnings. In the 16th century, Cesare Borgia, the ambitious Italian nobleman, had the charisma to unite territories and the strategy to outwit seasoned generals, but his unchecked appetite for power and pleasure became his undoing. Betrayals mounted, alliances collapsed, and his empire crumbled into irrelevance. His downfall wasn't from lack of intelligence, it was from failing a test of restraint. In the same way, the enemy isn't just trying to tempt you, he's trying to disqualify you from your position in the kingdom. When the test comes, will you see it for what it is? Will you remember that purity isn't a finish line you cross once, but a gate you must guard daily? Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." The enemy isn't threatened by a man who wins a single battle. He fears the man who can sustain victory over a lifetime. Walk with the quiet authority that needs no validation. Carry the kind of stillness that unsettles darkness. Be self-controlled and alert. 1 Peter 5:8. Because the same stillness that draws people toward you is also the shield that keeps the wrong ones out. You didn't endure the fire to end up back in chains. Guard what you've gained and stand your ground. So the enemy goes after your confidence. He whispers that you've earned this, that after all this discipline, you deserve a little indulgence. He tries to make you believe that purity is a means to personal reward, that the waiting must lead to some form of earthly satisfaction. And yes, it does lead to something, but not that. This season you're in is not about pleasure, it's about preparation. Isaiah 40:3 speaks of it. "Prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God." You're being positioned. Your name is being spoken in rooms you've never entered, Doors are forming in the spirit that you cannot yet see. The weight of your voice is increasing with every day you guard your spirit. But here's the danger. One moment of distraction, one compromise that feels harmless, one connection that seems innocent, and that authority evaporates. How many destinies have been forfeited? Not because the enemy attacked with force, but because he succeeded with subtlety. Have you ever noticed he doesn't come with fire and horns? He comes with charm, with carefully timed smiles, with opportunities that feel almost right. 2 Corinthians 11:14 warns, Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Indifferent. In nature, a glacier takes centuries to form, its mass pressing down with immeasurable weight, but all it takes is a shift in temperature, a subtle crack, and that ancient strength begins to fracture. In the same way, the closer you get to your God-given purpose, the more attractive you become to people who were never assigned to your future. That's why discernment now is more valuable than opportunity. Not every beautiful woman is a blessing, and not every connection is confirmation. Some are assignments from hell designed to distract, detour, and dismantle you. If you fall, you don't just lose momentum, you hand the enemy a manual on how to break you. Proverbs 25:28 says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. But if you stay steady, if you guard your frame and your spirit, you become like an unbreachable fortress. Imagine an ancient oak tree standing in an open field. Storms rage, winds tear at its branches, yet it remains rooted because its foundation runs deeper than the surface can show. It reminds me of a pivotal moment in the 1948 Italian film, The Bicycle Thief. The protagonist, having fought so hard to provide for his family, faces the crushing temptation to compromise his integrity. His decision in that moment shapes not only his own path, but the way his son will see him forever. In the same way, your restraint today will echo in the generations that follow you. So here's the question: will you trade years of preparation for seconds of pleasure? Will you surrender a crown for crumbs? Ephesians 6:13 commands, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. Walk with the focus of a soldier in his final round, the steadiness of a mountain unmoved by the wind, and the vision of a man who knows the kingdom is watching. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life. James 1:12. You've come too far to hand your victory away. Stand your ground and keep walking toward the assignment heaven wrote for you before time began. When reverence becomes your foundation, you move beyond being merely attractive. You become set apart. Holiness carries a glow no cosmetic can replicate. It's a radiance that doesn't shout, but draws in those tuned to the same spiritual frequency. And it attracts a rare kind of woman, the kind who prays more than she posts, who recognizes the value of your silence and doesn't rush to fill it, who treats your consecration as sacred ground. Proverbs 31:30 reminds us, charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. But here's the challenge. How can you meet her if you're still falling for those who only arrive to test your power? The enemy knows your type. He's studied your patterns. What happens if he dresses the test in everything you think you want? Can you still tell the difference between an assignment from God and a distraction from hell? Hebrews 5:14 says, "But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil." That kind of discernment is no accident. It's built in the hidden hours where your flesh wanted to give in, but your spirit refused. The man who survives this phase doesn't chase what's next. He walks into it, not passively, but with fire in his eyes and a sword in his spirit. Psychologists call this goal state embodiment, when your inner transformation rewires your posture, tone, and presence until you naturally move as the man you've become, not the one you're trying to be. After 90 days, something in your spirit doesn't just feel different, it is different. You're no longer wrestling with the same battles, no longer haunted by the same urges. You've shifted from surviving to aligning. Why? Because what you just walked through wasn't about quitting a habit, it was about entering a different spiritual architecture. In design terms, you've moved from scaffolding to structural permanence. The frame of your life is now ready to carry the weight of your purpose. We've seen this process in the life of Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing. In her early years, she withdrew from the comforts of her social status to answer a call she could not ignore. Those years of hidden preparation in hospitals and war zones forged a presence that could walk into chaos and restore order. In the same way, your season of restraint isn't just about what you've stopped doing, it's about who you've been built to become. And here's the truth, once your vessel is clean, God doesn't just bless you, He begins to assign you. 2 Timothy 2:21 declares, those who cleanse themselves will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the Master, and prepared to do any good work. What assignments could heaven trust you with if it knew you couldn't be swayed by money, by beauty, or by applause? So, I have to ask, will you be the man who collapses at the threshold, or the one who steps through with unwavering focus? Ecclesiastes 7-8 says, the end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. Step into the alignment you've been prepared for. Walk as one who knows that every battle, every sacrifice, every silent night has been building this moment. Be strong and courageous. Joshua 1-9. Because what's coming next will not just require your strength, it will require the unshakable man you've finally become. They say heaven does not hand heavy keys to careless hands. When God sees you resist the snares of lust, when you step beyond the pull of impulses that once chained you, He begins to entrust you with doors that lead into realms few ever see. To whom much is given, much will be required. Luke 12:48. And when you receive those heavier keys, you're not just opening opportunities, you're unlocking whole atmospheres. Suddenly, you find yourself standing in spaces where words are not thrown around cheaply. In these rooms, silence becomes a weapon, discernment becomes your compass, and obedience is the very oxygen you breathe. The change is almost unnerving. Why does your voice suddenly feel heavier? Why do people lean in? Not because you shout, but because your words seem carved from a place beyond the common. It's because you are no longer echoing what you once heard. You are releasing what you carry. In the book of Jeremiah, the prophet confesses, His word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. Jeremiah 20-9. That's what happens after a season of purity. The message is no longer borrowed. It's burning inside you. And there is a strange magnetism to this. 90 days without pollution, without surrendering to vanity, lust, or cheap gratification turns a man into something the world struggles to label. It's not always about religion. Prophetic simply means you walk with precision, aligned to divine timing. You stop chasing instead. Blessings and opportunities start tracking you down. Like the psalmist wrote, Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Psalm 23:6. What if your restraint is not holding you back, but pulling the future toward you at divine speed? In moments like this, you begin to attract clarity instead of chaos. You no longer beg for doors to open, you become the open door. You don't shrink yourself to fit into other people's worlds. You start to realize you were designed to disrupt them. The presence you carry bends the atmosphere, like a great tree reshaping the wind's direction. When you walk into a room, conversation pause. Not because you demanded attention, but because heaven just shifted the frequency. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Matthew 5:13-14. This pattern is echoed in history. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who disciplined both his mind and moral conduct, once said, "A man who won't die for something is not fit to live." His life proved that conviction without compromise is magnetic. It draws nations. But there's also the other side, the cautionary shadow. Take Giacomo Casanova. Famed in the 18th century for indulgence and manipulation, though celebrated in his time, his latter years ended in poverty and loneliness. A man once desired, now dismissed. Proving that a life ruled by lust eventually robs you of dignity and destiny. Your transformation doesn't just shift human perception, it rattles the spirit realm. This is why forces fight to keep you trapped in cycles. Paul warned, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit? You are not your own. You were bought at a price." 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. If you truly walked in that reality, the influence you'd wield would terrify those who profit from your weakness. So, whose kingdom are you empowering when you give in? And whose kingdom do you threaten when you stand firm? The arts have whispered this truth. In Victor Hugo's Les Misérables, Jean Valjean's transformation from convict to savior only begins when he turns from destructive impulse to disciplined purpose. The world around him changes, not because it was ready, but because he became unmovable. And isn't that the call of the chosen? To become the kind of force that heaven can trust, to walk into enemy territory without losing the oil on your head. When you stop feeding lust, you stop feeding the very system designed to keep you small. You begin to hear the still, sharp voice that says, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah 6-8. And you realize it's you, not by accident, not by chance, but by divine appointment. The question is, will you keep living as if you are powerless? Or will you step into the stature God has been shaping in you all along? Do not hand your crown to counterfeit kings. Break the pattern, guard the temple, and walk into the rooms that heaven has been preparing for you. Because once you cross this line, there is no going back, and that's exactly the point. People don't lean in because you've learnt a few clever phrases, or because you stand taller than others. They lean in because of your scent, the fragrance of a life that has conquered itself. Just as a forest after the rain releases an aroma that tells the earth it has been cleansed, your spirit now releases a signal that heaven recognizes. Thanks be to God, who always leads us as captives in Christ's triumphal procession and uses us to spread the aroma of the knowledge of Him everywhere. 2 Corinthians 2:14. The man who subdues his own impulses is ready to carry something far heavier than his own ambitions. And here's what few realize: God wastes nothing. Every tear you shed, every restless night where your thoughts wrestled with temptation, every battle with lust, shame, guilt, and silence, each was a brick laid into the foundation of your real identity. Like the deep roots of an ancient oak, unseen but unshakable, Those hidden struggles have been anchoring you for the storms ahead. What if the nights you thought were meaningless were actually heaven's construction hours? Now, you have become a vessel fit for purpose, set apart for impact. And yet here's the turn no one expects. Once alignment comes, resistance increases, not because you're off course, but because the moment your name is whispered in the courts of heaven, the enemy receives a notification in the camp of darkness. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. 1 Peter 5-8. That's why the pressure rises. You don't just live for yourself anymore. You carry generations within you. Just as a single river upstream determines the life of entire valleys below, your obedience alters the flow of bloodlines. When you speak, old patterns shatter like brittle ice under the first warmth of spring. When you pray, dormant destinies awaken as if the sun itself has stepped into the room. And when you show up, you're no longer part of the crowd, you're the storm that parts it. Nature preaches this lesson without words. Consider the salmon that swim upstream against violent currents, not because the journey is easy, but because the future of their species depends on their return. Isn't your calling the same? Each act of resistance against temptation is not just survival, it's the seedbed of revival for those who will come after you. Art has hinted at this truth. In the musical Les Miserables, there is a moment where Jean Valjean sings of the day his chains fell and his life was no longer his own. That is the sound of a man whose will has been forged in the fire. A man who knows that the fight was never just about him. Your transformation carries the same melody, one that will echo in the corridors of history. The opposition you face is not a sign of your weakness, it is a sign of your weight. Just as storm winds seek out the tallest peaks, the spiritual resistance seeks out those who have risen above the tree line of compromise. And isn't it worth asking if your voice can shift bloodlines? What would happen if you refused to speak? This is the moment to plant your feet, to refuse to bow, to let your life become the unshakable landmark for those still wandering in the fog. You are not merely surviving the battle, you are rewriting the map for everyone tied to your name. Rise now, because the generations inside you are waiting for the sound of your step. There is a frequency heaven designed only for the pure in heart, and the enemy cannot tune into it. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Matthew 5-8. Purity is not merely the absence of sin, it is the calibration of your soul to the wavelength of heaven. Just as in quantum physics, particles align when they vibrate at the same frequency, your spirit aligns with God when lust no longer distorts your signal, and when you reach that alignment, you become invisible to certain spiritual attacks, not because the darkness doesn't exist, but because it can no longer detect your presence. Imagine this, a fortified city with walls so high and seamless that no enemy scout can even see what's inside. That's what purity does to your inner life. Every moment you choose holiness over habit, you reinforce the architecture of your spiritual fortress. The name of the Lord is a fortified tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. Proverbs 18:10. Could it be that your unseen victories in private are the reason the enemy's arrows keep falling short? In psychology, there's a phenomenon known as selective attention. The brain ignores signals it deems irrelevant. Purity works the same way in reverse. You become irrelevant to the strategies of hell. Your old temptations lose their hold because you have changed the locks on the door of your mind. When you break free from cycles of self-pollution, you remove the very coordinates the enemy once used to track you. History gives us a vivid parallel. Corrie ten Boom, a Dutch Christian who hid Jews from the Nazis during World War II. once said, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." She lived a life so attuned to heaven that even in a concentration camp, the enemy could not break her spirit. Isn't that the same supernatural concealment that purity offers you in the spirit realm? And here's the hidden warfare. The enemy studies patterns. He cannot read your mind, but he can read your habits. The moment you silence those signals, you vanish from his radar. Paul wrote, "Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes." Ephesians 6:11. Why would he urge you to wear armor if the battle wasn't already watching for your vulnerabilities? In the design of cathedrals, architects understood resonance, the way sound travels in certain shapes. They built vaults so high that the human voice would carry upward, as if drawn to heaven itself. Your purity works the same way. It shapes your inner life into a chamber where only God's voice resonates. Does that explain why some prayers feel like they pierce the heavens, while others seem to hit the ceiling and fall back down? The moments you thought were wasted, the nights you fought in silence, the tears you cried without witness were not random. They were the soundproofing layers heaven was installing inside you. And when the time comes, you will discover you can walk through chaos without absorbing it, because the noise of the enemy simply cannot penetrate your frequency. But the question remains, will you keep broadcasting signals that make you easy prey? Or will you switch to heaven's private channel? Submit yourselves, then, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. James 4:7. This is not a poetic metaphor, it's a spiritual law. Now is the time to rise. Change your signal. Seal your walls. Live in such a way that the only footsteps hell hears are the ones retreating as you advance. Because when you tune yourself to heaven's frequency, you don't just survive the battle, you become the message it cannot intercept. There are treasures in heaven's vaults that are not guarded by angels with flaming swords, but by the condition of your own soul. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Proverbs 2-6. When you conquer the battlefield of your own desires, you are not just proving discipline, you are unlocking the coordinates to vaults of divine intelligence. These are the blueprints for strategies, inventions, solutions, and revelations that the world desperately needs but cannot access without holiness. Joseph, in Genesis 39:41, he resisted the seduction of Potiphar's wife, choosing prison over pollution. And what happened next? God didn't just vindicate him, he handed him the interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, a plan to save nations from famine, and a seat in the highest office of the land. Could it be that the visions you've been asking God for are not withheld by his reluctance, but by your unreadiness to carry their weight? In physics, there is a principle called signal-to-noise ratio. The clarity of a signal depends on the elimination of interference. Lust, vanity, and compulsive habits are not just sins, they are noise. And every time you cut one of them off, the signal of heaven grows sharper. What if the whisper you've been straining to hear is already there, but the static is drowning it out? History gives us a modern parallel. Nikola Tesla, the pioneering inventor behind alternating current and countless innovations, openly spoke about how celibacy gave him heightened mental focus and clarity. He believed that by redirecting sexual energy into intellectual and creative pursuits, the mind could tap into dimensions others could not imagine. Now imagine that principle under the hand of God, the same energy surrendered, sanctified, and used to solve heaven's assignments for your life. Architects of medieval cathedrals designed hidden chambers accessible only through intricate passageways and precise keys. ensuring that what was sacred could never be casually handled. In the same way, God hides certain revelations in rooms of your spirit that only open when your inner life meets the exact combination of obedience, humility, and purity. Jesus said, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." Luke 16:10. The enemy knows this. That's why he floods your life with distractions, not just to pull you into sin, but to keep you from ever holding the keys to the rooms where God's deepest secrets are stored. If he can keep you leaking strength through compromise, he can keep you locked out of the very knowledge that would dismantle his plans. Paul wrote, "We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, the hidden wisdom which God destined for our glory before time began." 1 Corinthians 2-6-7. And here's the question. If one moment of compromise can delay a lifetime of revelation, how much more could a season of consecration accelerate your destiny? Your restraint today may be the very password to the blueprint for your family's future, your city's revival, or the next breakthrough heaven wants to release through you. Guard the keys, silence the noise, and step into the vaults of wisdom that God has been waiting to open for those who can be trusted to hold them. Because when you walk in purity, you're not just protecting your soul, you're unlocking the very mind of Christ within you. When all is said and done, remember this: purity is not about what you are denying yourself. It's about what God can now entrust to you. Every moment you resist temptation is a deposit into the vault of wisdom He has prepared for your life. The blueprints, the strategies, the answers that can change generations are not handed to the careless. They are reserved for those who have proven they can guard what is holy. And if you're in this journey now, know this: you're not just holding back, you're positioning yourself to receive what no one else can carry for you. If this word resonated with your spirit, don't let it stop here. Like this video so the message can reach others who are ready to step into their own vault of wisdom. Share it with someone who's been struggling in the same battle, so they know they're not fighting alone. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your testimony might be the key someone else has been waiting for. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a word that could shift your entire season. Whether you've supported through super thanks or simply by showing up here today, I want you to know you are deeply appreciated. Your presence here is proof that you are hungry for what heaven has for you. Stay faithful, stay sharp, and stay pure. Your breakthrough is not just coming, it's being built in this very moment. God bless you, guide you, and guard you in every step ahead.